She posted, "If he really loved me, he'd understand me after ignoring me all week." I replied with a post, "If she respected me, she'd be honest." Her followers picked sides quickly. "He doesn't even check on me anymore. Maybe that's my answer." I read that line 3 times on her public Instagram story, with 47,000 followers watching, and I was sitting 5 feet away in the same apartment. That post wasn't just a sentence. It was a grenade rolled quietly across the kitchen floor while she smiled at her phone and I pretended not to notice. It was written in that particular language women sometimes use online, soft enough to seem like vulnerability, sharp enough to cut anyone who actually knew the context. And I knew the context, every word of it, because I had been living inside that context for the past 7 days while she refused to say a single word to me directly. Not one. She had 47,000 people to talk to, apparently. I just wasn't one of them anymore. I didn't say anything that night. I closed my phone, set it face down on the coffee table, and stared at the ceiling. But here's what you need to understand. What happened in the next 48 hours would make that Instagram story look like a warm-up act. We had been together for 2 years and 4 months. That's not a small number. That's birthday dinners and midnight arguments and knowing exactly how she takes her coffee and the specific way she laughs when something genuinely catches her off guard versus when she's performing laughter for a room. That's real. That's built. And I could feel it fracturing the way old wood splits. Not all at once, but one quiet crack at a time, getting louder, getting closer to the center. What I stood to lose wasn't just a relationship. It was the version of my life that had been built around that relationship. The apartment we had unofficially made ours. The friends who were really her friends first. The Friday routines. The inside jokes. The whole invisible architecture of a shared life. Losing Claire wouldn't just mean losing Claire. It would mean losing the floor I was standing on. And the worst part? I still didn't fully understand what I had done wrong. That's the thing nobody talks about when relationships go sideways through silence. You can sit with a wrong feeling for days and still not be handed the charge sheet. She had gone quiet on me like a punishment, and I was supposed to decode which crime I was being punished for. I didn't realize it then, but that moment on the couch, reading that post, would change everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 27. She was 25. We had met through a mutual friend at a rooftop thing 2.5 years ago, dated for a few months before making it official, and had been living together, technically in her apartment, though I paid half the rent, for the last year. She was a content creator. Lifestyle, fashion, a little bit of relationship content. That last category was the one that would eventually become relevant. The silence started on a Tuesday. Not with a fight, not with a slammed door, not with any of the usual dramatic signals that tell you something has gone wrong. It started with a text that didn't get answered. I had messaged her around noon. Something completely ordinary, something like, "You want me to grab food on the way home?" And the ticks went blue. She read it, and then nothing came back. I figured she was busy, filming, editing, on a call with a brand. That was always possible with her. I grabbed food anyway, came home, and found her on the couch with her ring light set up and her camera rolling, deep in the middle of filming something. I gave her space, ate quietly at the kitchen counter, and waited. She finished filming around 9, came into the kitchen, opened the fridge, pulled out leftovers I hadn't touched, and reheated them without a word. I asked how the filming went. "Fine," she said. That was it. That was the full conversation. Fine. I told myself, everyone has off days. Everyone needs quiet sometimes. I gave her Tuesday completely. No pressure. No questions. Just presence. Wednesday morning, she was up before me. By the time I came into the kitchen, she had already made coffee, only 1 cup, and was sitting at the table scrolling her phone. I made my own cup and sat across from her. She didn't look up. "Everything okay?" I tried. "Yeah, just tired." That was Wednesday's entire vocabulary between us. By Thursday, I was starting to feel it. That low, crawling unease that lives in the stomach and doesn't announce itself. Something was wrong. Not tired wrong. Not busy wrong. Wrong. The kind of wrong that has a direction, that is pointed at something specific. And I had the growing, nauseating suspicion that the something specific was me. I tried again Thursday evening. I sat down next to her, close, and I said, "Hey, talk to me. What's going on?" She looked at me for a moment. Really looked at me. And then she said, "Nothing. I'm just in my head," and went back to her phone. I sat there for a moment longer than I should have, hoping something else would come. It didn't. Friday, she went out. Didn't say where. Came back late. I was already in bed, mostly asleep, and I heard her come in and go straight to the bathroom, and then climb into bed on her side with the very careful, deliberate quietness of someone who doesn't want to start a conversation. I lay there awake in the dark and thought about all the ways a person can be lonely inside a relationship. About how silence from someone who knows exactly how to reach you is somehow louder than any argument. She could have texted me, called me, looked at me over dinner, asked me literally anything. Instead, she was choosing this, choosing distance the way you choose a coat in winter, deliberately, because it keeps something out. Saturday came and went in the same key. Sunday too. By Monday, I had mentally run through every possible version of what I might have done wrong at least a dozen times. Had I said something dismissive? Had I forgotten something important? Had I been too busy with work and not noticed her needing more from me? I genuinely could not find the specific crime. And that, somehow, made it worse. Because a man who knows exactly what he did wrong can at least apologize for a real thing. I was being tried for a charge I hadn't been read. Monday night, I tried one more time. Claire, I need you to talk to me. Whatever it is, just say it. Please. She looked up from her laptop. And I swear, for just a second, I thought she was going to. Her expression shifted, softened at the edges, and her mouth opened slightly like the words were right there. Then something closed back up behind her eyes. I'm just dealing with some things. Give me space. And that was it. I gave her space. I had been giving her space for 7 days. Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the silence started, I woke up to my phone already buzzing. Not calls. Notifications. Instagram notifications. More than I had ever gotten in a single morning, and I wasn't even a person who used Instagram in any serious way. I had maybe 340 followers, mostly coworkers and old friends, and a few accounts I didn't even remember following. No brand deals. No ring light. Just a casual profile. But someone had tagged me in something. Multiple someones, actually. I opened the app while still lying in bed, eyes half adjusted to the light, and I found it. She had posted on her main account. Not a story, a real post. The kind that stays up and lives on your grid. A photo of herself, soft lighting, leaning against the window, looking away from the camera with that particular aesthetic vulnerability she had learned to manufacture in exactly the right dose to maximize engagement. And underneath the photo, the caption, "If he really loved me, he'd understand me without me having to explain everything." 47,000 followers. Posted 3 hours ago while I was still asleep in the same apartment. I sat up in bed. She was in the shower. I could hear the water running. I read the caption again. And again. It was crafted. It had the architecture of something written and rewritten. It was designed to do 3 things simultaneously. Present her as someone who was hurting, present him, me, though never named, as someone who was failing her, and invite the audience into the narrative in a way that guaranteed they would only ever have her side of it. No context, no dialogue, no mention of a week of silence that I had been trying to break every single day. Just the polished, edited version. Comments were already in the thousands. Girl, if he doesn't get it by now, he never will. You deserve someone who just knows. Low-key, this is exactly what I went through. Run. Some men will never understand emotional labor. Sis, you're saying everything I'm feeling. And then, near the bottom, someone had tagged my username directly. At my handle, she's talking about you, isn't she? Do better. A stranger on the internet had found my account and walked right into my life in under 3 hours. I put my phone down on the bed, sat very still. The shower was still running, and I made a decision. I didn't storm into the bathroom. I didn't confront her the second she came out. I waited. I sat with it, which is something I had learned to do. Feel something enormous without immediately letting it explode outward. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen counter. She came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, walked past me with barely a glance, got dressed in the bedroom, came back out, picked up her phone off the counter, and started scrolling. She was scrolling through the comments on her own post. She was reading all of it. And I watched her face, and I saw something I hadn't expected. She wasn't just passively absorbing it. She was feeding on it. The little almost smile at certain comments. The way her thumb slowed when she found one she particularly liked. The slight tilt of her head that meant she was satisfied. She had been silent with me for a week, unable to explain what was wrong, unable to give me a single real sentence. But she had managed to produce a carefully lit photograph and a caption designed to generate maximum sympathy. "Coffee's hot," I said. "Thanks," she said, still looking at her phone. She poured herself a cup and went to sit on the couch. I stood there at the counter and thought about every piece of advice I had ever heard about not going public with private relationship issues, about keeping things between you, about having the dignity of not making your pain a performance. And then I thought, she didn't extend me that same courtesy. I picked up my phone, opened Instagram, and I wrote a post of my own. But before I hit post, something made me pause. Not second thoughts about posting. Something else. While I had the app open, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. One of the comments on her post wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone called at Alistair.ph, and the comment just said, "You deserve better." That wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that when I tapped on the profile, I recognized the face in the profile picture. Alistair. He was a photographer her agency had introduced her to about 3 months ago. They had worked together on a campaign. She had mentioned him exactly twice. Once when she said the shoot went well, once when she said he was really professional. I had never had any reason to think about him again. He had 6,000 followers. He wasn't a big name, just someone adjacent to her world. But he had commented on her post within the first hour of it going up. "You deserve better." I stared at that comment for a long time. Then I tapped out of his profile, and I wrote my post. The caption I wrote was simple, deliberate, and I chose every word with the same care she had chosen hers. If she respected me, she'd be honest. Silence isn't communication. It's control. I used a plain photo, just me, neutral background, no filter, no soft lighting, no performed vulnerability, just a face and words. I posted it, put my phone down, and went to work. By the time I came home that evening, my phone was doing something it had never done before. It was busy. 300 notifications. 400. Not all were kind. Some were hostile, clearly coming over from her audience. But others were different. Men and women both, sharing their own versions of this story. People who had been on the receiving end of a silence that ended in a public post. People who recognized the particular cruelty of being publicly blamed without being privately told what for. She was home when I got there. She was sitting on the couch with her arms crossed and her jaw tight, and she had clearly been waiting. "You posted that?" she said. Not a question, really. "I did. You responded to my post on social media?" There was something almost funny about the outrage in her voice. Almost. The woman who had spent a week refusing to speak to me and had posted a caption to 47,000 followers implying I was a bad partner was now offended that I had responded. "You made it public," I said. "You made it a conversation between you and your audience. I just added my voice to that conversation. That's not the same. Explain to me how it's different." She opened her mouth and closed it. "You embarrassed me," she finally said. "I told the truth," I said. "You told a version of events that didn't include the part where you refused to talk to me for 7 days." Her followers hadn't heard that part. The comment section hadn't heard that. Alistair, with his 6,000 followers and his "you deserve better," certainly hadn't offered that context. The room was very quiet. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen, stood up, and walked into the bedroom to take the call. While she was in the bedroom, I sat on the couch and looked at what was happening online. My post had crossed 1,000 likes. The comments were split, which was actually more than I expected. I had anticipated being torn apart by her audience completely, and there was certainly a faction doing exactly that. But there was another group, loud and growing, that was asking the question I had been silently asking all week. Wait, she posted about him publicly without telling him directly? That's messed up. The "he should just understand me" mentality without actually communicating is a red flag. If she had real issues, she should have spoken to him directly, not performed it for followers. Bro did nothing wrong. If you want to be understood, you have to be willing to explain. And then her followers pushed back on those people. Hard. It became the kind of comments section war that the algorithm loves. Engagement through conflict, everyone picking a side, nobody reading anything carefully, the original context irrelevant now that the momentum had taken over. Someone screenshot both posts and put them side by side in a Twitter thread that was getting retweeted faster than I could track. Relationship drama of the week. She posts, "If he loved me, he'd understand." He responds, "If she respected me, she'd be honest." Who is right? The poll at the bottom had 12,000 votes in 4 hours. We were no longer just two people in an apartment. We were content. The bedroom door opened after about 20 minutes. She came back out, and her expression had shifted. The outrage had gone somewhere else, replaced by something more complicated. Quieter. Almost like she had been told something she hadn't wanted to hear. "That was Gwen," she said. "Her older sister." I waited. "She saw your post. And mine." And she looked at me for a long moment. Then she sat back down on the couch, not with her arms crossed this time, and she looked at her hands. She said, "I should talk to you," she said. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not hope exactly, more like the very first breath after being underwater. "Then talk to me," I said. "Please. A week too late, but I'm still here. Talk to me." And she did. What came out of her over the next 2 hours reframed every single day of that week. It didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, the way real truth usually does. Not a confession, but an excavation, layer by layer, with long pauses in between where she'd look away and I'd wait, and eventually another layer would come loose. 3 weeks before the silence started, she had gone to a routine checkup. They had found something. Not catastrophic. She was at pains to tell me that, multiple times, clearly having rehearsed the framing. Not dangerous. Not the worst thing. But something that needed to be watched, that required follow-up appointments, that had introduced into her life a new and very cold-blooded companion called uncertainty. A small mass. Probably benign. But probably is a word that changes how you sleep. She had found out on a Thursday. She hadn't told me. She hadn't told anyone. She had sat with it alone for 3 weeks. Through 2 follow-up appointments. Through a phone call with a specialist. Through nights I remembered as ordinary because I hadn't known there was anything extraordinary happening inside her. And at some point the weight of carrying it alone had curdled into something toxic. Fear had become withdrawal. Withdrawal had become resentment. Not at me specifically, but at the situation, at vulnerability itself, at the fact that she needed someone and couldn't figure out how to say so. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because I didn't want you to look at me differently." I sat with that. "You've been carrying this alone for 3 weeks and then posted that I wasn't showing up for you." "I know," she said quietly. "How was I supposed to show up for something you didn't tell me about?" She didn't answer that. But the silence this time was different. It wasn't the cold, strategic silence of the week before. It was something broken and genuinely ashamed. "I kept thinking," she said, "that if you really loved me, you'd see it. You'd feel that something was wrong and push harder. And when you just kept going normally, I felt like proof that you didn't care." "I know that doesn't make sense." "It makes emotional sense," I said. "It doesn't make logical sense. There's a difference." I was scared. "I know." And then I posted that thing, and the comments felt like validation. Yes. She looked like she hated herself a little for admitting that. And here's the thing. I understood it. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was okay. But I understood it. When you're terrified and you feel alone and you can't figure out how to ask for what you need, and suddenly 47,000 strangers are telling you that you're the wrong party and you deserve better, that probably feels like something. Like warmth. Like being seen, even if what they're seeing is an edited version of a much more complicated reality. The Alistair comment suddenly made sense too. He had noticed, in their last interaction, that she seemed off. Had DM'd her to check in. She had, apparently, mentioned vaguely that things were hard at home. He had left the comment in the spirit of support, not knowing what had actually happened. Or so she said. I chose to believe her. For now. With this context, I went back through the week in my mind and saw it completely differently. Tuesday, when she hadn't responded to my food text, she had just come home from a follow-up appointment. She was sitting with results on her phone. The ring light and the camera were her way of escaping into work, into the self she could control. The single cup of coffee on Wednesday, not a power move. She had made her coffee before she was fully awake, her mind somewhere else entirely, and hadn't thought about a second cup until it was too late to walk it back without making it seem significant. I'm just in my head, on Thursday, the truest thing she had said all week, and I had just accepted it at face value because I didn't know what she was in her head about. Her coming home late on Friday, she had gone to see a friend, a woman from her childhood, the only person she had told about the medical thing. She had needed someone, but hadn't been able to be that someone with me. Every moment looked different now, not entirely redeemed, because whatever the reason, leaving me in silence while performing vulnerability publicly was still a choice she made. And choices have consequences, but different. The story I had been telling myself all week, the one where she was cold and strategic and withholding by nature, softened into something more human and more heartbreaking. She wasn't cruel. She was terrified, and she had handled it in the worst possible way. Both things were true at the same time. The post stayed up. That was the first thing we disagreed about in the new, post-confession landscape of our relationship. She wanted me to take mine down. I asked her to take hers down first. She said hers was up first, and taking it down now would look suspicious to her audience. I said that was exactly the problem, that she was more concerned with how things looked to 47,000 strangers than with what was actually true between the two of us. We went back and forth on it for a while. Eventually, she took hers down. I left mine up for another day and then quietly archived it without making a thing of it. The internet moved on. These things always have a shelf life. The Twitter thread got buried under the next drama. The comment sections went quiet, and the poll, which had ended up at about 55% in my favor, for whatever that was worth, disappeared into the irrelevant past. What didn't disappear was the conversation we needed to have about the medical situation, which was, as she had said, almost certainly benign. The follow-up appointment was in 2 weeks. I went with her. We sat in a waiting room with very bad coffee and very outdated magazines, and she held my hand the entire time with a grip that told me everything her words had failed to say for 3 weeks. The results came back the way they had expected. Watchful waiting, no immediate concern, come back in 6 months. She cried in the car afterward. Not from relief, I think, but from the accumulated pressure of 3 weeks of carrying it alone finally, having somewhere to go. I held her in the parking lot for a long time. About the social media thing, that was a harder conversation, and it took more than one session. The relationship she had with her platform was tangled up with her sense of self in ways that I could see, but not entirely navigate. Content creation was her career, her creative outlet, her community, but it had also become, somewhere along the way, a place where she processed things she couldn't process in her actual life. And that was a problem when the thing she needed to process was us. We were not content. Our arguments were not material. Our silences were not aesthetic. I drew that line clearly, and she, after some initial pushback, agreed to respect it. About trust, that was the longest conversation. Because here's what I kept coming back to. She had been carrying something terrifying for 3 weeks, and her instinct hadn't been to come to me. I was supposed to be the person she came to. And the fact that she hadn't, the fact that she'd gone to a friend, to a comment section, to a photographer she barely knew, before coming to me said something about how safe I made her feel. Or didn't make her feel. That was uncomfortable to sit with. I had to ask myself honest questions. Had I, in the ordinary flow of our relationship, made her feel like her fear would be received well? Had I made space for that? Or had I been competent and practical in a way that didn't leave much room for the kind of raw, frightened vulnerability she had needed to express? I didn't have clean answers. We didn't have clean answers. What we had was the decision to stay and figure it out, which is less romantic than it sounds and more real than anything else available. Her friends, predictably, had opinions. Most of them had been in the comment section of her original post and had taken her side, which was fair, given that they'd only had her side at that point. When the full story came out in bits through her own conversations with them, the dynamic shifted. Some of them were gracious about it. One of them, a girl called Bex who I had never particularly warmed to, maintained that I had still been wrong to post publicly in response, and that 2 wrongs didn't make a right. I didn't argue with Bex. Bex's opinion of me was not something I was optimizing for. My own friends, the few who had seen the exchange, were mostly just confused and relieved when I told them it had been resolved. Men don't typically dissect this kind of thing with the granularity that women seem to. My friend Tobias said, "That sounds exhausting. Are you okay?" And then we talked about something else, which was its own kind of support. The person whose response mattered most was Gwen. Claire's sister called me directly about a week after the blow-up, just to check in. She said she was glad Claire had finally talked to me. She said she had told Claire for weeks that she needed to say something, that silence was not a communication strategy, that no one, not even someone who loved you, could respond to a need they didn't know you had. She knows that now, Gwen said. She's stubborn, but she's not dumb. I know she's not, I said. You're a good one, Gwen said. Don't disappear. I told her I wasn't planning to. 6 weeks after all of it, we were still in the apartment. Different in small ways. The way couples are always different after something cracks and gets repaired. More careful in some places. More direct in others. She had made a rule for herself about the platform. Nothing about us without my explicit knowledge. Not vague posts. Not aesthetic emotional captions. Nothing that could be read as being about me by anyone who knew us. It was a line she had chosen, and I respected her for choosing it. I had made a rule for myself too. Ask more. Push past, I'm fine, and just tired, and I'm in my head, and keep asking until I got something real. Because I had let a week of silence go on partly because I was respecting her space, and partly because I hadn't wanted to be the person who pushed too hard. That restraint had looked, from where she was standing, like indifference. Perception is a strange thing in relationships. You can be doing the exact right thing and have it read as the exact wrong thing, depending on what the other person's fear is telling them at that moment. That's not an excuse for not communicating. It's just a fact about how human beings work. The solution isn't to guess better. The solution is to say the thing out loud, even when saying it is terrifying, even when you're afraid of how it will be received. She had learned that. I had learned that I needed to make receiving it safer. We were both learning, which is, I think, the only honest thing you can say about two people trying to build something that lasts. Every now and then, someone still finds that Twitter thread. The internet doesn't fully forget. Occasionally, I'll get a notification, a new comment on my archived post, someone discovering the story through some algorithmic rabbit hole and weighing in weeks or months later. Some of them are kind. Some of them aren't. A few of them have asked what happened, whether we worked it out, whether she ever apologized properly. I don't respond. Not because I don't have answers, but because our story isn't theirs to weigh in on anymore. It was never really theirs to weigh in on in the first place. It became public because she put it there, and I responded because I was angry and hurt and also, honestly, a little proud, because I had been silent for a week and I was done being silent. But the moment it was resolved, it stopped being the internet's business. Some things should be private. That's not repression. That's just the basic dignity of keeping the center of your life yours. The day after she took her post down, she made 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of me without saying anything, sat across the table, and we drank coffee together in silence, but a completely different kind of silence than the week before. A comfortable one, a real one. I had spent 7 days inside a silence that felt like a door slammed in my face. That morning, the silence felt like a door left open. Same quiet, completely different. That's the thing about communication, or the lack of it. It's not just what's said. It's what the space between people means. And you don't know what silence means until you know what's underneath it. She had been scared. I had been shut out. We had both made it public when it should have stayed private. And somehow, despite all of that, we were still at the same table. Still drinking coffee. Still trying.